Hello and welcome to Cyber Talks, where we discuss all things cyber. It's my pleasure to introduce Inbar Ries, our glorious Chief Product Officer at Cy. How are you doing this morning, Inbar?
Fine, thank you. And I will use the opportunity to introduce my amazing colleague, Nimrod Partush, who is the VP of Data Scientist, and bring with him many years of experience and PhD from the Technion.
Oof.
And we both work together on many things related to cyber, and one of them is the risk.
Yeah, so let's start off by talking about quantifying risk, and let me ask you, so what would you say are the trends right now in quantifying organizational risk? Like what are people doing? What are companies doing right now?
I can tell you from the companies and organizational perspective, cybersecurity remains one of the main risk factors organizations are facing today. And each organization is using multiple solutions where each solution covers different part of the organization. For example, only the cloud, only the internet perimeter, or only the on-prem, and basically calculate and quantify the risk based on different data.
Yeah, and each one of these solutions usually uses a different scoring metric or a scoring
Exactly.
range.
Some
You
of
get
them,
100, you get an 800.
yes, and sometimes even level, high, medium, low, and even more, there are the severity of the vulnerabilities or misconfiguration that they're taking into account. Although it play a major role in the calculation, it's only its importance is very low because it doesn't take into account if an attacker can really exploit it and leverage on that. When it comes to the risk quantifications. So with so many numbers that the CISO and his team should take and look on that and even take a mitigation decision on that, it's become very hard to understand what is your organization real risk.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I could say that from an academic or a standardized point of view, so you have like the common vulnerability scoring system. So as a CISO, if you go online and you look for something, you probably end up seeing that, which is very, it's very common. And even that system, you can see that it's focused on single vulnerabilities usually. So it does factor in a lot of metrics, a lot of terms and considerations like the impact of the vulnerability, but still it's very hard to compound different vulnerabilities together and assess them to get like a whole organizational view from that single metric. So although it's nice, it's limited.
So based on your experience and the fact that we provide products to so many customers, how do you quantify? How do you think that they should quantify the risk?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first thing which a lot of systems who give scoring and give quantification forget is just measuring and finding out does the vulnerability, the finding, the problem, is it exploitable? Can an attacker really exploit it? Is it hidden somewhere deep within the networks of the organization where it's very unlikely to be exploited? Or is it something internet facing that is just calling out for an attacker and can put the organization in real danger? So that's a major thing to take into account. And another major part, I think, that should come into account is, does the vulnerability even lead the attacker to an interesting place? Does it give him access to the business critical assets of the organization? Can he get into the intellectual property of the company? Can he access private records and leak them? So I think that's those are considerations that should really come into effect.
So can we look at it for example, like a funnel that, first of all, the first layer will look like, okay, this is all the findings, okay, all the vulnerabilities and misconfiguration that are available within the organization. Afterwards, a subset of that, okay, would be only the ones that can really be exploited by an attacker, and an attacker can get into it. And out of that, okay, we will take only the vulnerabilities and misconfiguration that can really create a successful attack routes from the starting position. For example, attacker that starts from the internet without prior information or an insider, and to the business asset, as you mentioned, which can be customer information, employee information, business continuity, and things like that. As we can see, the last layer play a very important role in their risk calculation compared to findings that are available over here that no one can get into it. And even if they can get into it, they won't be able to exploit it and really leverage on that.
So I really like this sort of view, and just from a numbers point of view, right? Here you can have like 1,000 vulnerabilities here, and here you can have like 100, and here at the end you could have just 10, which is much more manageable. And those are the real things that you want to look at. And if you want to look at it in a graphical sort of view, so it can look something like this, right? You can have a lot of different problems and vulnerabilities that lead somewhere, may or may not lead to an interesting position. Here in the next level, you have the things that do lead to something that is exploitable, but you don't really know how they all connect together. And at the end of this funnel, you can have like this really nice connected graph where you can really see the path of an attacker. Those are the things that you should address eventually.
Yes, I fully agree with you.
So if we're talking about this funnel and these findings and vulnerabilities and locating them, so the question arises: what data do you need to truly reflect the organizational risk? What data points should you base yourself on?
First of all, the risk should be calculated based on all the organization. And when I mentioned about all the organization, I mean the cloud, the internet perimeter, the on-prem, and not just the environment, but also multiple security domains when it comes to identity management, sensitive data management, network management, and so on. So you need to get a full picture, not just the vulnerabilities, but also misconfigurations. And also take into account additional factors like procedures and training of employees, in order that, since we're looking on security in layers, so you will know, so even if your email filtering hasn't stopped the email, you need that the human factor will protect you as well as a second layer, for example. So therefore, in order to calculate the cybersecurity risk, you need to take everything, even the SOC effectiveness as well.
Yeah, I have to say that I really like the policies example, because people often think that it's just about finding like the coolest, newest exploit, but a lot of the times the main issues is just people use bad passwords in the organizations. They don't have a policy, don't have the awareness, and they use bad passwords. Your dog plus 123. So those are sometimes the big issues that are forgotten.
I fully agree with you. So first of all, you need to get all the data, and you need to have additional context on the data. And this is very important. For example, as you mentioned before, is it exploitable? Yes or no? And even if it's an exploitable, can every kid on the block can read and search for it and download tools? Yes, exactly. Or you need a national level, someone that really knows how to do things for the first time.
Yeah, those are the APTs.
Yes, exactly. So you need a lot of context, and not just, okay, I found something. I need to have, for example, okay, on which business asset, on which information it reflects. Okay, if I will fix that one, what will happen? Is the customer information will be protected? The employee information will be protected? What will be different? And after, when you have all that data, this is the only place that you can, okay, start and calculate the risk in an accurate way.
Yeah, that's a very good view for that issue. You know, as a data scientist, from looking at at data that you can use in Compound, the answer to what's risky and what should you address. Another interesting part is like I would say the freshness of the information. So if you look into just this case of assessing the vulnerabilities, an interesting and important part of it is how exploitable is this vulnerability, like how likely it is to be exploited. Is it like a 90% chance or a 0.1% chance? And in order to, have that perspective up to date, you need to mine a lot of data sources. You need to, look at the dark web and do some threat hunting and see where's the chatter and what's the trend for each of these different exploits. So that's data that you need to mine. You need to keep it fresh, and you need to bring it to the decision table.
Although we constantly speak about risk and the fact that risk is the main, cybersecurity is the main risk factors, is risk by itself is enough?
Yeah, I really love this question because a lot of the times when organizations talk about risk, and even if they are focused about business critical assets like intellectual property, etc., and let's say private records. So even if you quantify it in a very real way and you say, listen, this is the path to this critical asset, and its probability is 0.9 to the IP records, but to the private records it's 0.1, very unlikely probability. So you would address the findings that lead to the IP asset. But if I'll tell you, listen, the meaning of having your IP exposed is just, it's $1 million for your business. But if you have your private records leaked and you have like 1 billion private records, you would pay a 1 billion fine. So this really changes the picture, right? And so what I think you should focus on is the exposure, which is like the probability for reaching a critical asset multiplied by the meaning, the business meaning, the number that you'll pay if that asset is exposed. So if you look at it here, you take 0.1 and multiply it by 1 billion, you get 100 million for this asset. And here you would get just 900K for the IP asset. So that really changes the picture and the prioritization of things.
I really connect to the fact that exposure in financial terms is very important. I think it's very important in two ways. In one way, it helps the CISO speak the management and the board language. And today, the management and the board are highly invested and involved in the security posture of the organization. So if you have the whole information and the exposure, it basically helps them to convey the message. Okay, what is at risk? As you mentioned, employee information, customer information, IP information is at risk. Okay, what is the probability that something like that will happen? 20%, 80%, 70%. If something like that will happen, what will be the cost of the breach?
Because the board wants numbers.
Yes, they would like numbers, and they would like numbers that they will understand. And the financial terms, money, this is something that is very common and understandable. Yes, quantified and understandable. So as soon as they provided them with the probability and the cost, okay, again, they will get the exposure. And right now, the organization need to think, the management and the board need to think if they can live with such numbers, with such exposure. And the second reason that I really like it, that from that point, the CISO and his team can drive decisions based on the exposure. Okay, I cannot live with 1 billion. Okay, what I need to do in order to reduce only that exposure. Okay, and if you don't have a solution that will show you the context, as we spoke before, okay, which vulnerabilities, misconfiguration impact on that business asset, and will help me to fix and to reduce the likelihood, I won't be able to reduce the exposure, and I will find myself investing not in the right places. And last, the fact that they see the numbers also help the CISO and his team get more resources, more budgets, and convey the message to the organization, what is the situation.
Yeah, and if you have this very accurate view, you can also prioritize in a very efficient way just by saying what is the first finding I'm fixing that would reduce the overall exposure the most. So if we're talking about the next step, which is mitigation, let me ask you, so how would a CISO plan for mitigation and allocating resources in an ROI way?
I can tell you that I worked with a lot of organizations, okay, small and big ones, and no matter how big the organization and how profitable it is, there is always limit of resources and always limit of budget. So the CISO and his team need to show and build a very optimized mitigation plan. They need to know that every dollar or euro that they invest or every hour of a person is invested in the right place. And it all goes together into the exposure. Okay, I would like to first invest in things that will reduce my organization exposure. Second, I would like to disconnect routes, attack routes, successful routes. I won't invest within vulnerability or a misconfiguration that an attacker cannot get to, or even if they can get to, they won't be able to leverage on that. So my focus would be to look first, okay, not stop there, but to look first on successful attack routes, that this will bring me the maximum impact in reduce of likelihood that something will happen, maximum impact when calculating, of course, the risk, and maximum impact in case of reducing the exposure, that at the end of the day, all of them will lead to much more posture organizations.
Yeah.
So I need an algorithm and context and data that will help me to build and prioritize and create a very clear list between 1 to n, not multiple vulnerabilities and misconfiguration using the same prioritization, like when you have 100 items with the same critical. Okay, out of the critical, what should I do first? So I need to create a very clear, ordered prioritization between all the things that I found in order to get at.
Yeah, and I think that reduction of exposure is, it's a key factor, and it's very visible and quantifiable because as a CISO, I can go to my board and tell them, look, I'm mitigating these findings. They will cost you this and those numbers, but it will reduce the exposure in a very quantifiable and specific way, which is, great. That's the way to move things and make decisions. Yeah, so I feel like we really, connected the loop here and went full circle in discussing risk today. So we started from, just saying how can you quantify risk in an organizational level, take everything into account, and then saying that we should focus on the parts that exploitable, that lead to a critical asset, and then we need to quantify what's the impact of those findings, give them a dollar amount, and reach basically the exposure metric, and then finally we're talking about mitigation, which is just reducing that number in a very efficient and a very prioritized way. So this full circle is really relevant for I think CISOs who are trying to reduce risk.
Yes,
for
because it's only a matter when it comes to cybersecurity attack, the everyone says it's only a matter of time. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of time, and therefore the optimized mitigation, it is so important because when it happens, you would like to know that you did everything correct and at least block the attacker to do the real harm.
Yeah, definitely.
So thank you very much.
Yeah.
It was a pleasure.
It was
as
a lot
always,
of fun, Inbar, yeah.
We can share with everyone how our day-to-day work looks like.
Yeah, let's. Now we're just going back to the office and keep
continue from
the
there.
same conversation going and just keep talking about it.
Yeah. So thank you all for listening and good luck.